across Europe, and because also of the complexity of the regulations of each country. Here is a list of national associations that are presently affiliated with the European Association of Counselling and their national representatives. You can see Germany, Greece, Malta, Spain, Sweden, Serbia, Russia, and Italy. I didn't find a national representative listed for Italy. Probably this has to do with the fact that in Italy there are many counseling associations at the present. There is a European Association for Counseling certificate, which is awarded to any European Association counseling member who is also accredited member of a professional counseling organization, national organization, accredited also by the EAC. And there are specific criteria and professional training standards that need to be met in order for the counselors to apply for the particular certificate. Now, counseling is not a regulated profession in Europe as far as the European Commission is concerned. So, as some of you already know, the profession is unregulated in certain European countries and regulated in others. So if the profession is unregulated in the EU country of destination, there is no need to apply for recognition of qualifications. And the counselor can begin practicing in the host member state, abiding and complying by the national rules of registration of a business and health and safety. In the case that the profession is regulated in a particular EU country, then counselors are able to gain recognition of their qualifications by providing evidence of recent job experience of at least 3 years and in the form of a certificate of competence. The certificate it's something that needs to be provided by the counselors' organization in the country where they originally practiced. So there is this possibility of the recognition of the profession only in the countries that where the profession is regulated. Now, in Greece, there is no licensing. The profession is not regulated. Major areas of counseling are in mental health and career counseling. There is the Hellenic Association for Counseling that was established in 1994. It is a founding member of the European Association for Counseling, and it gives accreditation for mental health and clinical mental health counseling. There are graduate programs that are accredited by the Hellenic Association for Counseling and the European Association for Counseling in Greece. One of them is at the Hellenic American University in Athens, where the conference of the ACA took place several years ago. Some of you might remember. There is a concentration of the Master of Science in Psychology with a specialization in clinical mental health counseling. There are 2 other master programs in mental health counseling, one at the University of Athens, where I teach, and another at the University of Thessaly. And there are also training programs outside higher education, and they're not always associated with the National Association of Counseling in Greece. Now, for career counseling, there is another organization, the National Organization for the Certification of qualifications in vocational guidance. In 2018, there was the creation of a registry for career counselors, which makes the profession more established. I have to say that career counseling has a longer history in Greece than mental health counseling. And there is a master's program at the University of Athens, another one at the Higher School of Pedagogical and Technological Education, and other training programs, again, outside the university. So to work as a mental health counselor in Greece, if you come from abroad, you need to hold a master's degree in counseling or related field, have relevant experience, or hold a bachelor's degree, seminars in counseling, and professional experience. You can submit your degrees to the interdisciplinary organization for the recognition of academic qualifications. And this is optional, but it is a good idea because it is a well-established organization. And also you can become a member of the Hellenic Association of Counseling, and this is optional again in order to practice. In the same way as a career counselor, master's degree or bachelor's degree, again, you can submit your degree for recognition, and you can register at the National Organization for Vocational Guidance. Finally, I would like to say a few words about supervised practice. It needs to be initiated by the university graduate programs or training programs that come into contact with the counseling placement centers in Greece. In terms of mental health counseling and career counseling, as I'm familiar with the counseling practice environments in Greece, you're welcome to contact me if you're interested. Of course, the language is a problem many times, although many Greek people speak English, but not every placement, of course. This can serve in English. There are some possibilities now working with refugees, with NGOs and other governmental agencies that currently work with the refugees who reside in Greece. That's all I can say for now, and I'm open to questions. I hope I didn't take very much time. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. We are getting some questions in. I'm thinking maybe it would be a good idea to leave the questions until the end, which would then allow us to kind of get into a nice chat mode and see how we can respond to many as possible. Thank you, Dr. Isaru. Dr. Sanis?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
So thank you so much for inviting me to be a panelist today. I know Dr. Elizabeth Crunk, who I think was involved or the division. So it's really exciting to see everyone representing so many different countries and so many areas of practice. And my hope is that I can perhaps just in a bit more informal way, share my experience, and maybe that will help generate some questions, and then I'm happy to answer them at the end for everyone. And maybe it's just helpful to, first of all, I have you on gallery view. I have to say, with a training as a therapist, I don't know if any of you have this issue, and doing group therapy, I'm constantly looking at everyone and everybody's eyes and my training And I always have a hard time going from kind of that mode to speaking. So if you see me pause or hesitate, I'm trying to get out of therapist mode and into speaking mode. So anyway, it's a lovely bridge, but it's kind of, I always think that's kind of a funny experience. So anyway, I've been practicing for about 20 years, and my background actually started in rehabilitation counseling, kind of in the disability world. And then I got my PhD from GW counseling, which was a fantastic experience, and a lot of great mentors. And my training was primarily in trauma. So I trained under some pretty amazing people, Chris Courtois and Sylvia Murata, and all these people in complex trauma, dissociation, DID. I did inpatient work at a specialized trauma unit, and did private practice work in a trauma practice, and worked with some some amazing survivors of trauma, and really a testament to who we are as people, and that we're survivors. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that work really prepared me in a way to do international work, and be able to co-found this practice and look at everything holistically. So this other part of my life is that we're a foreign service family. So I went overseas. My husband's also happens to be Scandinavian. So I have this family that's Scandinavian. I'm from Texas. We kind of have this cool mix of things, which makes us very strong-willed people. And anyway, so we lived in the UK for about 3 years, and then we lived in Sweden. We've lived in Norway. At the time, I had small children, and was really focused on that, and living kind of an expat life, and trying to get my head around a different identity from all my academic work. And then it became very clear. I had a lot of friends and a lot of connections who were really struggling with their mental health and really needed support and assistance. And they had no idea how to get it overseas. And if they did, they found it to be difficult, either due to a language barrier or due to various cultural aspects. And so I thought, well, is there a way that I could use what I know and provide this service in a very safe way, an ethical way, and a legal way? Because it was not my intention to practice in a country where obviously there are very well-trained, very good therapists there. However, if there was a language barrier or other kind of dynamics going on that was prohibitive for some expats to go seek help in country, I wanted to be a little bit creative and figure out how they could get some help. So I met, it just so happened that I had a very good friend and clinical psychologist on the ground with me in Sweden, Dr. Tammy Nelson. And she said, well, why don't we should we try doing online work? And so from my training, that's like saying, oh no, you don't do online work. That's not real therapy, okay? And so that was a tough bridge for me in general. And also with my trauma training, it was safety and the ethical practice of counseling. Not to mention, how do we do this legally and safely and effectively in country? So we spent about 9 to 10 months or longer hammering out these issues and trying to figure out how we keep clients safe, how we create the business aspect of it. How do we go into a country, seek out their board, ask permission, or, discover whether or not the term counselor or therapist is protected or regulated. And as I was listening to Dr. Isari's presentation, I was just thinking how wonderful that would have been to have as a resource when we were starting this, because I couldn't find the information anywhere. So we did our very best to come up with what would informed consent look like. How would we protect clients? How do we protect ourselves? How in a crisis situation when they're sitting in another country, how do we assist them? What are our limits? And how can we contact a physician? Are the rules different? In some Mideastern countries, as we all know, if you're suicidal, that's actually kind of considered criminal. So how would we deal with that? So these were all the issues that we were wrestling with. But we managed to, while we were in Sweden, work most of that out. We understood that since we didn't live permanently in Sweden at the time, we were there with the US Embassy, that we could practice because it wasn't it wasn't regulated. Now, if I had stayed in country and wanted to practice in Sweden, that would have been a different story, because then I would have to meet certain standards and learn the language, and then, you know, of course, all of the economics around having a job in Sweden and taxes and all that kind of thing. So we got launched in Sweden, and then I repatriated back to Virginia. I hold a license in Virginia in DC, and the question became, okay, who can we practice with overseas? How do we keep their safety and security #1 priority while doing ethical work? Same questions, but also this idea of malpractice and all those very real issues that we have to consider. So we had to pick our malpractice very carefully. That would cover most of that. We even looked into broad-based insurance to help us. That was extremely pricey, to say the very, very least. And it would have been a very tailored insurance package out of Lloyd's of London, I think. So all of those issues were very complex, but we found a way to do it that was legal and ethical and was not to the tune of, I think, something like $20,000 that they were asking for from Lloyd's. So anyway, so we've been doing this now for 4 years. And then when COVID hit, we saw a massive difference. You saw the rigidity lighten up because we had to. We had to keep working with our suicidal patients, even though we couldn't see them in practice. And everybody started to have an open mind about the online world because of absolute necessity. So I have seen so much more interest and so much more kind of recognition of doing online work in the last year. And then also these questions, I think more people are interested in, since we're just so much more global. How do we work with people even if they're overseas? What are our limitations? What are hard and fast no's who we will not work with? How do we liaise with other therapists in other countries? And how do we, it's certainly not our intention to take over in another country. It's just what are our limits and who can we offer services for? We've had a very successful practice. We have contractors now that are helping us out. And we work with people who are overseas, primarily American expats who are overseas, but then we also work with people in Virginia and DC, whatever state in which we're licensed, which, you know, when we talk about state to state online therapy and all that, that kind of seems easy peasy at this point when you're trying to work overseas. So I know many of you are placed overseas and looking at the logistics of how to work and build a practice. And then some of you might be looking to, in a more globally mobile way, how do you work if you're moving around? And then if you're in the US and you need to work with somebody either short-term or long-term and they're placed in another country, hopefully I can offer some thoughts there for you. And although I might not have all of the answers, but I can speak to my experience and I can speak to certainly the safety and security. I think what we've done in our practice very well is developed a very comprehensive informed consent and a method to keep clients very safe as possible. And again, that's how my trauma world kind of mixed with this and how I use screening and different consultations in order to make sure I can serve a client, serve them well, and serve them safely where they are. It's amazing work. It's pretty outstanding to be in 20 different countries in 1 week. So that's really fun. It's fulfilling in many different ways. We're also in underserved countries, which just brings a completely different worldview and I think a compassion and a different flavor to the work, which I think is pretty amazing. So obviously I really love what I do. I also work here in Virginia. For this point, COVID, but I do client or my and team for families in global transition, FIGT.org. It says my internet is unstable, so I might have frozen on you. Anyway, if you can still hear me, can you nod a little bit for me? There, thank you, Dr. Lowenthal. Perfect. Okay, you happen to be in my stage left over here, so I could see you more quickly. So anyway, so that has been a fantastic group. I think in addition to this group would be amazing. So it's the counseling and coaching affiliate of FIGT.org. They're an amazing group of international coaches and therapists. Some people use the coaching term to get out from under a counseling term. People have different feelings about that. But it's a fantastic group of people as well that you can have a look at. So yeah, I know that was kind of informal. Hopefully it gave you a little flavor of my background and my practice and kind of how I came to be. And it's just wonderful to meet all of you. And I look forward to your questions. I'll do my best to answer them in a way that's helpful to you. Thanks so much, Sandra.
Thank you, Dr. Sanis. And again, a reminder, please put your questions in the chat. We already have a few questions that we would love to answer for you. We've had some questions emailed to us as well. Dr. Lowenthal? Whenever you're ready.
I'm just trying to share my screen. I'm afraid I've got a problem. I've got an exclamation mark on my desktop. I have to share this, so don't know how to get
Works fine until you're ready to use it, right? And then, ta-da, not working.
I've got the presentation on my desktop. And I've gone to share, but I've got an exclamation mark come up towards my desktop. So I think I'm going to have a problem with that. So I think I'd best just have a look at it myself. And I don't think I'm going to be able to share it, unfortunately.
If you, in the chat, you can actually upload a file. So if you share it through there, one of us can share the screen. Maybe it'll work.
Okay, let's have a look.
While that's happening, we did have a question about whether or not you all are able to network. And in the chat, we posted our Instagram and Facebook links, and we'll post that again just so that everyone can have that, so we can all stay connected.
I'm wondering if I could I send it to you, Rachel? Would that be a way of doing it?
Sounds perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I've just sent it.
It's still moving through cyberspace, but it should be here soon. All right, gonna share my screen, just letting y'all know so your whole world doesn't get turned upside down all of a sudden.
Great. Thank you very much. Apologies for that. And thank you. Thank you, Rachel. So thanks to you and also Dr. Bernardo for inviting me and the University of Sacramento. I'm old enough to, very old actually, to remember the song, The Last Train to Sacramento. If you miss this one, you'll never get another one. So I immediately said yes. I also once in my earlier life hitched towards Sacramento, and I don't know if I have time to tell you that story, but I'll instead talk about what I think you've asked me to talk about. So if we could move to the next slide, please. I'm talking about counselling and psychotherapy in the United Kingdom. I don't know how long it's going to be united, you know, but Scotland's moving away and probably Northern Ireland, but for the moment it's the United Kingdom. And the counselling and psychotherapy is fairly homogeneous. There's a little bit of differences sometimes in Scotland, but it's very similar throughout, unlike perhaps the United States. If we go to the next slide. So look, this is amazing. This is, it's really taking off in the UK. It's very popular. You can see that there's currently over 211,000 therapists in the UK. It's booming. Next one, please. So just a few statistics. You know, that we have a population getting towards 70 million. There's an increasing elderly population. Life expectancy's gone up, but slowed down recently. We'll just move on to the next slide. So one of the key things with regard to the UK has been the Second World War and Freud moving to the UK from Vienna. I actually have some photographs, you may not have time of Freud's consulting rooms in London. But Melanie Klein was already there, but with Freud, people came around like Bion, Bowlby, Winnicott, Lang, etc. And there's also a strong development of humanistic and integrative therapies, as well as existential, behavioral, CBT, very much growing, and working with regards to individuals, couples, groups, families, systems. It's interesting listening to Philia talking, Dr. Isari. We don't have in the UK so much sort of anything called mental health counselling as such, or career counselling very much. I'll maybe come back to that. But one of the things we've had increasingly is state regulation. And so we have, for example, as I'm a counselling psychologist, I'm under the Health and Care Professions Council, which is a statutory body. And as a psychotherapist, I'm under a voluntary body called the Professional Standards Authority. If we move to the next slide. So there are a variety of professional bodies in the UK. And in order to be, if you like, a license, you need to go through these bodies. Again, I can say more about any of these if you would like me to. But if we move on for the moment. So all these organizations require a training period. It can be done part-time, but they don't have to be university programs other than in counselling psychology. In England, UK, you can be a counsellor at doctoral level, you can be a counsellor at undergraduate level, and you don't need a first degree. So they vary in length from a minimum of 4 years to 2 years. If we move to the next slide. One distinguishing factor is how many times you can have personal therapy. And over the years, this has been reduced. So the British Psychoanalytic Council require up to 3 times a week, the UKCP twice a week. But there was a time when the British Psychoanalytic Council would never have gone for once a week, or UKCP, it would be possible to have some equivalent to therapy. If we go to the next slide. So there's no legal minimum qualifications, but programs are run by private organizations and charitable organizations. That's the history. There are university trainings, but they still go through the professional bodies. The next one, please. So, so there's been a trend previously for psychodynamic and humanistic approaches. We continue to be influenced by developments in North America. And there's an increasing interest in the relational, not just in psychoanalysis, but there's a move to Jacques Lacan, Lacanian analysis, and within humanism, more towards integrative approaches. There's been a great rise in CBT, and we have a government program called Improving Access to Psychological Therapies, IACT, which is a national rollout program throughout the country where people, through their doctor, their general practitioner on the National Health Service, can get normally up to 6 CBT type therapy sessions. But the demand is so great that less resources can be put in always for individuals. So there may be library studies, things like that. But that IACT program's been through CBT, where the government train people and pay people on high and low intensity training programs. There's a growth in evidence-based practices, which I'll say a bit more, and also this kind of measurement systems, whether it be depression and anxiety, or we have our own system called CORE. We go to the next one. So, was there one before? So there's no legal minimum qualifications necessary to practice as a psychotherapist and counsellor in the UK. You can just set up and call yourself one. I'll say more about that. We've got quite an increasingly ethnically diverse population. We're predominantly still a white society, and we're underrepresented in terms of people from other non-white cultures in terms of therapists. We've got a tradition of Christian healing and also of complementary therapies. So there's a concern in some quarters that we're professionalizing things and we're increasing individualism at the expense of community and the common good. Is there another slide? So with regard to research, there's a growing emphasis. The government, through the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, regards randomized control trials as the gold standard. There are those who believe that is the only research method. There are those who believe it can sometimes be appropriate. There are those like myself who believe it's completely inappropriate and we haven't got a clue, but we pretend to know. And there are those who say we've got no choice but to accept this. And certainly my colleague Nick Cooper, who's talked with you, he would go along with that. And also other colleagues are saying, well, we've got to do it to get government to change aspects. We have the next slide. With regard to research funding, there isn't specific research funding. We have an Economic and Social Research Council. Sometimes the professional bodies support some. And until recently, we had funding from the European Union. I got considerable funding to look at the development of the therapeutic use of photographs, for example, and then another project looking at using photographs for emotional learning in European prisons. But we've now Brexit, we've left the EU. And next slide, please. These are the kind of journals. We have a good history of journals. These are more academic journals. The professional bodies also have their own more monthly, weekly, more magazine type articles as well. And the next one, please. So supervision is generally a requirement for ongoing registration, clinical supervision in groups or one-to-one. And there's a growing emphasis on CPD, continuous professional development, that there wasn't previously. The next slide. So with regard to further issues, we have IAPT, and it's a report came out that all governments accepted, and one of its great strengths is it emphasized the talking therapies and away from medication. And I think that's an enormous strength of it. The difficulty with it seemed to emphasize, because of the evidence base, CBT type approaches, which I think are great, but not the only game in town. There's also a question for some people as to how long the effects last of it. So there's growing interest in common factors. It's, as I say, it's reaching now more and more of the population. I was involved in providing a service for frontline workers who were working in, say, nursing care homes, who previously wouldn't have had therapy. They've got involved in that. With regard to the talks from Kelly and Philia earlier, I did have a few other thoughts. I was interested with regard to Philia talking about career counselling and mental health counselling. And as I said, we don't have that in the UK in that way, but I notice that the East, India, China, places like that, are increasing counselling and psychotherapy. And some of them are particularly using that kind of American model. And I think one day we may find that we get influenced by Indian and Chinese models with regard to what we're doing in the West. I also, with regard to Kelly, I agree with so much what you were saying about the internet. It's changed things so much. I'm somebody who, I don't know, was it just over a year ago, refused to do therapy on the phone, by text, anyway, going other than face-to-face. And I now run a program, an existential analytics psychotherapy training program, all on the internet these days. I do all my clinical work, supervision and therapy on the internet, and I quite enjoy it. And you know, whilst I'm looking forward to seeing people face to face, I'm looking forward to also in future working on the internet, which opens up possibilities, as I think Kelly was talking about, of working in other countries. And I'd finally say that if you do want to come to the UK, and you're most welcome, of course you don't now, you can just do it on the internet. But the key thing in the UK is to be able to advertise through certain websites. The most popular one is called Counselling Directory. And if you can get on that, then that's probably your best way. There are others, like psychologies. And with regard to qualifications, it is possible to look at some of these professional bodies and see if they've got independent routes, whereby you could use the qualifications you've got, and if necessary, top up on them, rather than have to train throughout. So I don't know how we're doing for time, but I think that's more than my time, so I'll keep quiet. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Wow, great presentations and really, really thorough. I personally learned a lot. I do want to go ahead and get to the questions. We have some questions from in our live chat, as well as questions that have been emailed to us. I will try and mix it up, that way we can address as many as we can. If you all are able to stay longer and our panelists are able to stay longer to respond to your questions, Dr. Marshall and I will be here. First question that we have is from our live chat, which is, how do you establish a practice when you have to work under the name coach, but you're working in rather counseling or therapy? How will your clients know what to expect?
So was that working under
Dr. So I think the question, and whoever asked this question, if you want to clarify it a bit, you can, but I think this was off of what Kelly mentioned about using the name coach. And then, so the question was about how will your clients know what to expect if you're using the name coach, but then you're actually doing counseling or therapy? Whoever
Sandra.
asked that question.
Yeah, I asked that
Yes.
question.
Okay.
The thing is, in Germany, coach is something that it's okay here to be a coach, but it's not regulated. So there's nobody knows exactly. But if I work as a counselor, what I meant is, based on my trainings, like Kelly also said, for her was also like online. That was for me first. It's like, no, it's not possible. And so if I say I'm a coach, but I'm working as a counselor, which I see now because I work as an employee, but I work employee assistance program. All my German colleagues are real coaches, NLP through and through, neuro-linguistic, whatever. And I use my counseling, what I did in the States. So when the clients come to me, they are always, oh, the Frau so-and-so is working very differently than you do. So that's what I mean. So if I would go private practice, how would I do that if I say I'm a coach?
So, so first of all, it's just very structurally. I'm happy to start to start us off here, and then if anyone else wants to chime in or just let me know or give me a wave, Philia or Del. So this is a great question. Okay, so the overall question here is, how do you practice legally in your country, right? And so in Germany, it sounds like you can use the term coach. You can set up shop, so to speak, and provide a service, okay? And you can take money for that service and create a practice or provide this service. From my ethical and legal part, because my top concern is the patient or the client in this case, would be, are you providing treatment, right? And then if you're providing treatment and you're providing a diagnosis, and to me, the coaching term becomes tricky. And what I always ask myself in this situation is a worst case scenario, going very CBT, right? You do a worst case scenario, which is if a person that you're coaching under, let's say you're using coaching, but you're treating kind of, and you've provided a diagnosis and you have a treatment plan, or you're working under a treatment plan, and they become suicidal and something happens, right? Obviously, it's a great tragedy for the person and the family. What does that mean legally and ethically in your country? What is your responsibility as a medical physician in Germany? I imagine there's a responsibility and a legal authority, also with, I would imagine, a clinical psychologist. So coming from a highly litigious country, the US, that would be very difficult here. If you were a coach but provided treatment, my guess is that judge would not look favorably on that. And it's unethical to practice with a client when you don't have this idea of informed consent. What are you doing with them? Right. What are you doing with them? What are they entitled to? Are you keeping progress notes? Do you have a treatment plan? And again, I'm coming from an American perspective, which that is what we do here, which in Germany, they're going to have different laws on all of that documentation stuff and treatment stuff there. So for me, the question would be, what is your obligation as a practitioner? What service are you providing? And what are you treating? And if you are treating, what is your obligation to the client and legally and ethically in the country? That's my kind of gut feeling at first. And it's going to look different in Germany than in the US. In the US, we're going to be very strict. I'm not sure what it is in Germany.
I used to work in the US, so the US system I know well.
Right. I don't know if that helps kind of start the wheels turning there. I will say that, for example, in FIGT, some people do coaching, they do coaching protocols. When does that line from coaching turn to counseling? I would say it's clinical treatment. That's my kind of push there. Del and Philia might have other ideas, or other therapists and that are attending today. But it's about, what are you providing the client legal and ethically? Do they have informed consent about it? And what are their expectations about it? And how does that translate to the ethics and legalities of your country?
Thank you.
Or Philia or Adele,
Thank you.
anything else to share?
Well, I can start if you like, Philia. I haven't got much to add because we're in a much earlier stage, yeah, in terms of we're starting to get state intervention, you know, with regard to safeguarding young children, with regard to worrying about terrorism, things like that. But it's new, it's relatively new. So as I said earlier, we're starting to have national registers. So I would say that we've been fortunate in not having to worry about this stuff too much, but to focus on counselling. But it's changing. And so there's greater concern with regard to the legislation in different countries. But we're at a much earlier stage than it's coming, unfortunately.
I want to say that we're even at an earlier stage than you in Greece about that. And also in regards to coaching, it's a very, very new concept. I mean, there are some people, but it's very, very new. So that's what I want to say about that.
Okay, our next question is also from the live chat. Are there public school counselors or guidance counselors in the countries you are working in?
I could
So
answer. In Greece, there are career guidance counselors in the schools. But what a counselor, a school counselor would do, it's taken care by school psychologists. So there are no school counselors in the public schools.
And in the UK, yes, there are school counsellors. They tend to come and go. In London, in the 1970s, every school had a counsellor just about. Yeah, that's not the case today. So it varies, but there are school counsellors. There are counsellors in public, in the NHS, in the National Health Service, and in other occupations. Yes.
And also in international schools, they traditionally have school counselors. Yes. In different countries and international schools. And in Sweden, it was all done by the state, because they have a totally different model, like a national healthcare system there too. And so it was all done by commune. So it was done by which we would say our community or our district. And so they were school psychologists, I think probably more in line with what Philia was describing. They'd have school psychologists that would go into the school if there was an issue. I'm not sure about a dedicated, what we would think of as a school counselor, but definitely in the international schools.
Yes, for sure. I know that for the international schools in Germany and France, they do have that as well. A question from email. Can I complete practice or internship abroad? So if they were working on their degree in America and wanted to do an internship overseas, could they do that?
I just thought that's a question for people in America, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I know that for counselors, they would need to have supervision by a licensed supervisor. So I'm not sure if this person had other thoughts, but that was a question. Go ahead.
This is a great question, Sandra. I've been contacted about this actually in my practice. And what I always direct people to do is look at these state requirements. So in Virginia, for example, you have to have a pre-approved clinical supervisor for the LPC board, number one. And then number two, you have to have a clinical supervisor with certain qualifications like be an LPC. But then can you complete an internship, for example, in Germany? Okay. So that would have to do with, again, I would say, I would consult with your state board first to see if they will accept those internship hours underneath, for example, a clinical supervisor who's sitting in the state where you want to be licensed. You'd have to take all of that into account and see if that would be, and then not even mentioning the ethics around, for example, if you're in a psychology service in Germany, how are you going to sign off on their notes? Is that for a site supervisor? You'd have to work out those details, but I would consult with the LPC board in the state regarding what they would and wouldn't accept.
The other way around is possible as well. And that is, I for example, am providing therapy to somebody in Canada who signed on to a counselling psychology training in the UK. It is doing his placement, whatever you call it, in Canada.
We also have a question that was posted earlier, and it's, I don't know if any of our panelists is familiar with the French system, but the question is, they're looking for ways to move back to France, and they're wondering how that can be possible given the protection of professional titles. So the person says, I'm originally French and I'm looking for ways to go back to France sooner or later. And I'm wondering how that can be possible given the protection of professional titles there in France. Is anyone familiar with the French system? No? Okay. So that's something that maybe we could follow up on later on as we get information, would be happy to share it with you. From our chat, Tiffany asked, she is going to be moving from the US to Germany. Would I be able to practice under my New Jersey license, or would I need to obtain a German license? Does anyone know how difficult or easy the process is? I know, having worked in Germany, it depends. If you work for the US government, then you don't have to do anything about your license. If you work directly in Germany, outside of US regulation, then you would have to get whatever the credential is here in Germany. Hopefully that answers your question.
May I say
so
something to that one?
Yes,
To the German one?
absolutely.
Yeah. So the thing in Germany is that either you're a psychologist, like a psychologist, yeah, and then you can get somehow your credentials. If you're a counselor, then the other road is to do this Heilpraktiker license. The problem is with this, you're going to have to do it in German. and it's a year schooling. It costs quite money. So if you're ready to do this and your German good enough, then yes, you can do that. Afterwards, you will not be able to be paid by the health insurance of Germany, so to say, but everybody has to pay from the pocket. But there is a new development in Germany since last August, that if you're systemically, so in what we would call in the US family therapist, are trained in the German system at least, or you can get maybe, I'm trying to see that road down, I'm trying to see if I could do it this way. So if you have that kind of qualification, then slowly you're getting into the national system, which means you will be reimbursed by the national health insurance, which is the same as in Sweden. We have universal health care. Most European countries do. But you have to have their, very strict regulation that they can be paid. But this is the newest thing in Germany, which is a huge thing, because in Germany, every 100 years changes something. So now that changed, now nothing is going to change for 100 years, but this changed. And this is unbelievable. That was unbelievable. No, trust me, this is hard. So this is an unbelievable news. But if Tiffany wants to come, I've seen that there is another lady, Kashari Bright, who is able to talk to her. And I'm more than happy to talk to her too about the German system.
Thank you, Esme. Another question, what do I need to practice in the UK with a degree in counseling from the US?
And nothing.
What was the answer?
Nothing. You don't need
Nothing.
You don't even need a degree in counseling from the US. Yeah. So anyone can practice, can call himself a counsellor in the UK, but it's a question of how you advertise for that. And so if you advertise, as I suggest, have a look at counselling directory and see what qualifications they require. They will, I think, want them from British, UK professional bodies. So if you want to do it that, or if indeed you want to work, try and apply for jobs that are in schools or in states, you will need a UK qualification. And in that case, I would say contact, if you're only interested in counselling, then it probably contact the BACP, the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, and they will show you what you would need to do to get one of their qualifications. Or if you're interested in psychotherapy, contact the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy and see if you can do something through an independent route if you don't want to do the 4-year training and just want to try and top up your qualifications to meet what that particular part of the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy requires.
Okay, another question. This was through email. I don't know if Kelly may know the answer to this one, which is, can we practice international counseling with clients living in Europe while the counselor still lives in the US?
Great question. So yes, it depends on the country, and it depends on the litigiousness of the country and where your malpractice will cover. So what we always do is contact the board of counseling, and if one doesn't exist, we contact this psychology board, and we go through there. Usually it comes down to this idea that Philia was talking about, that Del has been talking about, is this, is the term regulated? Is the term counselor or therapist regulated? And in the UK, and I think I'm kind of proven wrong today, which I'm glad to hear from Del, it was my understanding that it was a bit more difficult. So we've traditionally not practiced in the UK for those reasons. I think Spain can be tricky, and France, but it's about this idea of regulation of terms. Philia, you might have a better perspective on this.
I think has to do, as you just said, about whether it is counseling it's in a regulated or an unregulated profession, depending on the country. For example, in Greece, you could. I mean, that's. But then it's always a good idea to contact the national, I think, counseling association. This is a safer way, and it's a good way to connect as well.
And if you want to come to the UK, one of the attractions is that your insurance you could get it for far less than $100 a year. I heard what Kelly's paying or something. So you have to pay your airfare.
I won't talk to Lloyd's again. Yeah, so one example is there was a person who is interested in receiving counseling services based in Mexico. So I contacted, the counseling, quite frankly, I just did I looked for an academic person. I couldn't find a board. I don't speak Spanish. I couldn't find the Board of Counseling there. I found some academic articles of a gentleman who talked about, counseling practice in Mexico. I contacted him. He happened to be the president of the board. I happened to talk about this particular situation and whether or not I could garner approval to work with this client while they were living in Mexico. And I did get that approval, but I went in that way because, again, it's the best way to protect my client. And then I also had a resource and an ally in country if something, if a crisis were to occur. So talking to the board, as Philia said, I think is the safest and is a really good ethical route.
We've had lots of questions about whether or not you have to have a degree when leaving the US to come to Europe. I think that's been answered. I think the general answer is no, but it's also country specific. I know for the UK, they'll said no, but it depends on the country. Am I getting that correct, panelist?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what you said, Philia, about Greece.
Yes, I'm not sure if I understood the question completely. Whether a degree needs to be recognized? Is this the question?
Yeah, we have several questions just worded in different ways about whether or not someone can use their degree that they earned in America in Europe.
Yeah, for Greece, for sure they could. I think the standards are much higher, actually. For example, than Greece, there would be a problem. So, but I don't know now in other countries where the profession is regulated, they might have more specifics. But I would think that a degree, every country has an organization that does the accreditation of the degree. The equivalency, or I don't know cannot find the English word now.
Yeah,
but I think it's in Greece there is also such an organization, although it is optional as it is right now. But I think it's a good idea to go through that, so that you feel safer about your practice.
Sure. It's a good answer. This question is from the chat, which the person's asking about whether or not they can practice telemental health, meaning if they live overseas, Germany, for example, can they practice telemental health? The answer is that it's state specific. It depends on your state and whether or not they allow that, and does your insurance cover you, and so on and so forth. I don't know if the other panelists want to add to that response, whether or not you can practice telemental health while you're overseas.
So yes, you can, but again, it comes back to this idea. Well, my big question when I got started, which I think many people have kind of worked through in this last year because of COVID is, does it matter where you're sitting or where the client sits? And
Right, exactly.
And the answer to that is both. So, and I think we've all gotten a big dose of that in the States. So it matters where you're sitting. If you're sitting internationally and your counseling is the term counseling is unregulated, and really your issue is going to be more about incurring the fee or the money and what that means to be providing a service in the country that you're in. But in terms of state to state, you have to be licensed in the state you're sitting and licensed in the state they're sitting. During COVID, many states, and many of you probably know this, have provided temporary licenses. New Jersey's been amazing with this. Temporary licenses to practice across state lines because of COVID. Because I had, for example, college students who went home completely decompensated. Of course, we're not going to find a new therapist there, and everybody's booked, by the way. Everyone is booked. It's hard to find mental health services these days. And so you would literally type in a request, for example, to New Jersey, and I got an email back in 30 seconds of a temporary license. And it was good for 6 months, and then they keep renewing it until June, for example. So it depends on where you sit and where the client sits. This is the take-home message.
Thank you. And then our last question is just a general question from everyone is, how do they get more information? Where can they find more information?
Well, if I could answer that, I did put up on the slide trying to answer that question. There's a couple of handbooks on counselling and psychotherapy in Europe, and one done by the American Counselling Association on case studies in around the world. And I put both those references up. I've also put links to all the major professional bodies in the UK. So I suggest for the UK, if you can have a look at that slide. I don't think we showed it at the time, but I'm sure Rachel can.
Rachel just shared it just now.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Philia or Kelly?
Yeah, I think I put some links as well myself. I haven't mentioned anything and didn't about psychotherapy in Greece, and just as Del did for the UK and Kelly. There are many psychotherapy associations. So if you're interested in that, so I could provide some links to that as well, if you're interested, because the counseling, I have already included them in the PowerPoint.
Thank you.
I think it takes, this group is, really sounds like well connected and provides a lot of resources and opportunity. So I would say it's a lot through network complex, kind of at the country level, and this idea of where I'm sitting, where the client's sitting. Start with, and also your state licensing board would be important to consult with. And again, finding out if the term is regulated or not. And then this added layer of how would you help an individual who is in crisis? If they're in another country or in your country, what does that look like?
Okay, thank you.
Good resource, sorry.
I'm sorry, say that again, Kelly.
FIGT is also a good resource.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And then for more information, you can always contact EBACA. We are on almost all the social media platforms, so you can private message with us, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. You can contact us on the ebaca.org website. And Dr. Marshall has posted her email as well. So I'm sure she can respond to your questions, but we would be happy to help if you have questions. I want to thank our wonderful panelists for being here and sharing their personal experiences and insight. It has been wonderful. If you have further questions, again, please feel free to email. I also want to thank California State University, Sacramento, and EBACA for hosting this. And a big, big thank you to Dr. Marshall. She has been the guru behind all of this, making it happen. And we are grateful for that. And thank you all for being here. I hope that this experience has been informative and we look forward to presenting more talks like this where you can ask questions and get information. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.